Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. I'm now posting on multiple platforms every day. There are links down below in the description. If there are any platforms you think I should be posting to, let me know and I'll see what I can do. Let's head on to the story. It's called Message in a Bottle, written by Assault Kitten. Archival Document Viewer 3.3 Student Edition. Fluid Smart Translate GR is on. Credentials verified. Welcome back, Sarah Hales. You have 3 pre-unread messages in your center. You have 0 overdue assignments in your assignment folder. You have 2 pending assignments in your assignment folder. Notice: the document you requested on Thursday, February 19, 394 ASC has been fully translated and uploaded to our servers. You'll find a direct database link to the document in a message title with the original name of the requested material. Notice addendum: I don't want to toot my own horn about being able to find it, but you really sent me on a chase to get a full version of this passage. I had to go through about 30 sets of complete network images. This is like 2 weeks of passive searching PR network images, by the way. Thanks, but we got plenty of machines for this kind of thing. Before I got a match on the quoted passage, and another dozen after that, before I found a salvageable raw text version of the document itself. A little cleanup and some cross-referencing later, and I think you'll be pleased with the results. I hope they're worth the wait. Best of luck in your thesis. Document Acquisition Specialist T. Harmon. Accessing Message Center. Unread Message in a Bottle, recounting the contact of those who lived it. Anthology. Unread. Attention students, this month is our school's 220th anniversary. Unread. Hey, this is Cole. I know you've been busy, but Fena is downtown this weekend. Retrieving document. This document has been Fluid Smart Translated GR. If you want to view this document in its original language and wording, or wish to change the cross-check GR automatic footnotes, please check the Options menu by sliding diagonally twice on your input pad. Message in a Bottle, recountings of contact from those who lived it, edited by Melron Tarvish. Note: a number of the questions asked in this interview, in this passage, are tangential to the start of the subject matter. These questions and answers are included in the document at the bottom in the main text. T. Harmon. Main text begins here. Interviewer: So, what in that in mind, would you please tell me about the Livonian culture and its reaction to the discovery of the wreckage of the essential spirit in your planet's moon? Elman Berelli. Yes, certainly. May I perhaps start a time before that to give extra context to my answer? Absolutely. Very good. Let us begin. Let's start in the situation alive us at the time when the vessel first crashed into the moon. Across the 2 continents on our planet, there were 7 major ethnic groups affiliated with numerous city-states. There were still dozens of languages and dialects, and most recent technological breakthroughs were word engines and a reliable process for forging steel. Word engines? Would those be devices for the mass production of written material? That is correct. From what we learned from the box, it would be analogous to human invention of the movable print. And how long ago was this? Approximately 450 Earth years ago? I'm sorry. I always forget the exact conversion. It was like 348 Livosian years ago. So, it seems like the wreck of the essential spirit was recorded at the time it happened. That is correct. It was thought to be a grim omen from the blackest depths of the night. It required numerous edicts from the prevailing spiritualistic groups to quell the terror it caused. As I noted in my response to your earlier questions, Livos' second moon, where the wreck happened, is comparatively much closer to our planet than the moon of the human home world. Less than a century after the ship crashed, the combination of seafloor dredging for silicate and advancement in glass-making techniques, the scholars who proclaimed those results were almost executed before they implored the ruling family of the region to look for themselves at the ship that rode the Black Knight like a boat upon the water. C-check note. Black Knight is an archaic Livosian religious reference. Black Night was a fearsome place where the eternally sleeping dead dwell until the sun itself rises for the last time. It is also the root word for their term for outer space. But Livosian technology wasn't anywhere near advanced enough to go to the moon at that point. How much longer did it take for that to happen? A little over 200. It bears mentioning that the ship already bore heavy cultural significance, and there were a handful of nights a year that the sun reflected properly off the wreckage and glinted brightly enough to be visible to the unaided eye. Once it became common knowledge that it was a ship, storytellers and hopeless romantics became fixated upon it. There are hundreds of period dramas, science fiction stories, and adventure tales with the mythos of that vessel as their core element. With that said, however, we only achieved spaceflight after the end of our first global conflict. It was a conflict that spanned nearly 2 decades and left 2 out of every 5 Lavosian dead. Well, the wounds began to heal from this terrible conflict. The 2 remaining industrial powers, Niall and Betis, translated from their arms production and weapons development to scientific study. Well, not publicly acknowledged, the 2 allied powers were hoping to solidify their power base permanently by being the first to claim whatever remained of the ship that had sat on the moon beckoning us for generations. And so, with a handful of years, Livos had achieved our first spaceflight, and in another 10, we had prepared the first mission to explore the ship. How big of an event was this mission? The event of the century, many called it at the time. My own mother and father heard the event broadcast live. Real-time video transmissions had not yet been developed, so they crowded around a large radio receiver in my grandfather's house and listened as history was made. The initial broadcast only lasted about 45 minutes, and only involved a very brief look inside the ship itself. I need to mention the 2 statements that go hand in hand with this first exploration and its first broadcast. First, the first thing said as they entered the ship itself. This statement does not translate very well, but it is more than what I could dream is a fair approximation. It is a line from a classic work of fiction describing the interior of the ship. Hearing those words uttered in absolute reverence by one of the spacefarers/astronauts who had sounded so calm and composed until that moment is the cornerstone of the development of the modern Livosian culture. The second statement is equally important, however. After exploring part of the ship, after entering through a large breach in the hull, the crew comes across one of several areas of the ship that received relatively little damage during the ship's crash landing. The forward suspension compartments, as was later determined by human investigation, the essential spirit had received severe damage from space debris while on a long-range scouting mission for potential colonization, leading all surviving crew to place the ship on emergency power and go into suspended sleep. It was only after nearly a century of low-power flight that it became entangled in our planet's gravity well and landed on the second moon. But we knew none of that. All that we knew was that the expeditionary lead set upon wiping some of the dark moon grit from the viewing bay of an unpowered suspension chamber and confirming its contents. We've found the sailors of the night, and they sleep forever. How long did the complete investigation of the ship take? The first mission returned home after a single week. Preparation had been meticulous, but all of the crew returning alive and in good health, with an initial set of samples far outweighed risking any more time than necessary on the first venture. Since habitation materials had been sent up before the mission itself, making additional trips was relatively easy. With that in mind, investigation of the ship was still ongoing by the time of contact, but the box was retrieved on the 6th mission, approximately 5 months after the first mission. That would be the Pullman cube, correct? Yes, that is correct. I apologize. I still find myself attached to the colloquial term. What year was this that the Pullman cube was brought back to Livos? 33 Livosian years pre-contact? You were a scientist involved in the study of the cube, I believe. Can you tell me about it? Yes, and I would be glad to. I came onto the project as a third-generation researcher. That is to say, 18 years into the project. By that time, the vast majority of information contained within the box had already been discovered and catalogued. Before I discuss my own role, I should speak of the project's history. The box itself came back on the 6th mission, after the retrieval of a variety of cargo and bodies of the crew. Due to its unremarkable appearance, it was initially overlooked as an item of interest, until some of the technicians in charge of moving it around the facility accidentally dropped it. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm quite serious. The impact of falling off the handcart was enough to activate it. It had been handled with extreme care until that point. Clearly not enough for the box to believe that it had been handled by any kind of intelligent life. Fortunately for us, the technicians were being accompanied by a future head of the project itself, scientific Dr. Neil. He quickly solved the lock on the box as it was presented, and, with extreme foresight, took notes on his first few minutes with the box. What was this lock? A series of math and logic problems presented visually. I believe Dr. Neal had to display basic pattern recognition, knowledge of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, basic knowledge of geometry, and finally understanding the concept of pi. That unlocked the first section of the box. A note on the Pullman cube. The Pullman cube was a device placed on board every government-sanctioned spacefaring human vessel. This device, a cube measuring 3 feet on its side, would initially display a series of logic problems described visually that, once solved, would begin a multi-step complete education about humanity for any alien race who discovered and unlocked it. Further information within the cube became available as more and more intricate problems were solved, culminating with problems that covered highly advanced engineering concepts, complex linguistic passages in a variety of human languages, and time-limited number problems requiring machine computation to solve. The final unlock on the cube was an invitation from humanity to come and find them among the stars. The forward cube has fallen out of favor for several derivatives that have been improved with suggestions from the Livosians and emergent technology. This was perhaps the single most important moment in the history of our race. From the cube itself, we learned that you had never encountered an alien race from the dawn of your civilization. You reached out to the stars, hoping that someone was out there besides you. Long ago, we had wondered the same. But you had proved to us that we were not alone without ever knowing so. We listened to everything you had to tell us. We hung off every word like eager children. First, basic things: human anatomy, biology, and the videos you had taken of your home planet. It was so beautiful and strange. Every corner of the globe was fixated on the materials that were captured and edited for broadcast for the general public. We learned the way that you count, the way that you used words, how your alien mouths made the strange sounds of your language. If I had to say one thing that struck me about what you had deigned to tell us, it was in the second to last set of information unlocked. I was finishing my own formal education at the time in hopes of becoming part of the very project. Motion pictures were rarely used as a media format outside of current news, historical documentation, and human education programming. But with the permission of the Foundation overseeing the project, a team of what you might call filmmakers edited the vast amount of information that you provided about the two global conflicts that you had prior to taking to the stars into what essentially amounts to a series of dramatic documentaries. Instead of traditional historical documentation films, these were presented in much the same tone as historical semi-fiction. See Check Note, an incredibly popular genre in Livonian printed media. These stories used existing historical accounts and used first-person perspectives to extrapolate on the narrative and highlight dramatic elements within historical setting. A cornerstone of the genre is that the stories do not ever contradict established historical fact, even if they embellish it. Literary works of this kind are best described as thoroughly well-researched and dramatically inclined biographies from the first person. There were perhaps 10 of these episodes dedicated to the first global conflict, and a further 30 to the second. The narration was dubbed in Livosi's trade language, and the portions that had Earth languages spoken were broadcast with subtitles. We had adored humans before this. Through learning of your greatest strife, we became to love you. You laid bare your failures, your weaknesses. You showed what greatness you were capable of and the evils that also lay in the heart of man. In that moment, we understood you. Our own failures, the horrors that we had committed against our own. Even then, we still hurt from those self-inflicted wounds. To see that another people had made the same mistakes we had, who had hated their own for so many petty reasons, who had triumphed over those failings, but never forgotten them. Pardon me. Let me collect my thoughts. Do you know what a Livosian term for humans was before contact? It was Teeman N. It means brother you have not met. That's, something else. Can you tell me about the contact, then? Yes, certainly. In the last year leading up to contact, we had struggled over the final set of problems posed by the box. Despite a fairly strong command of your language, there were a handful of linguistic problems that had stymied our attempts to solve them. I'd been assigned to the project for a number of years at that point, and having been a part of the linguistic team assigned to solve the last set of word problems, was beginning to become frustrated. There were 3 problems left to us, and frankly, none of them made any damn sense to us. The grammatical structure wasn't anything we'd seen before. Words without a single matching instance were plentiful, and what we thought were strings of junk characters were thrown together into seemingly random combinations. We were honestly afraid that there had been data corruption. Was there? Not at all. I need to give a frame of reference, however. With all of this talk of humans, I've yet to mention the catalyst for contact itself. That would be the Pylon Expeditionary Force, then? Yes. I would imagine anyone reading this interview would be much more familiar with that particular bit of information. See note check. Paylon Expeditionary Forces were small groups of military vessels that operated with a charter from the Paylon central government as resource hunters, scouts, and cartographers until the treaty signed in 227 ASC. The United Species Alliance was officially at war with the Paylon Federation, its various corporations, and their holdings. When the Paylons arrived, they didn't do so quietly. When they dropped out of Cold Warp, note, slang terminology for the time of high-efficiency FTL travel methods, we had several hours before their vessels even properly materialized to monitor them. I have to say, this is where our exposure to humanity does us no favors. We could not even begin to imagine these vessels were hostile after the message of friendship that humanity had given to us. So, imagine our horror when we sent vessels up for a diplomatic exchange, and as these ships fully fell to their travel states, they immediately opened fire upon them. They had 15 ships, none greater than Corvette class, by your standards, but we simply had no answers for them. At the behest of humanity itself, we had curtailed our foray into nuclear weapons development, and our highest-flying air vehicles used rudimentary jet engines. So began the siege of Lyvos. Despite their relative lack of power, they made quick work of any aircraft we launched, making landfall with half their ships and setting up a base of operations while the rest of the forces defended them from low orbit. What were you doing at this time? I was getting into that in a moment. When we visually confirmed that these aggressors weren't human, something that was both a great worry and a great relief to us, most major cities began evacuation. Those of us working with the box had the option to stay and keep working or go to be with their families. Since I had no husband and no child, I was free from any guilt for my decision to stay and continue my work and what might be the dying days of my people. Well, you clearly made some kind of breakthrough. What was it? Communications between members of the human language teams was usually done via text and wireless communications devices. It had become the de facto standard to send these messages in a simplified English. Note, a widely used derivative of Old English, a commonly used trade language during human intrasolar expansion to other members of the group. Something I must mention is that precision is extremely important to Livossi writing. A missed character in a passage with dozens of others will completely alter the meaning of the entire section of writing. So, in this moment of high stress, with sleep deprivation encroaching slowly but surely, and the weapons of alien foes laid at bare on our planet, I made a typo. Hold on, you made a typo. Could you elaborate? It's as simple as that. I sent a message that was not properly written. I asked for the time when a cooked food dish comparable to cheap, unhealthy instant meals was going to be ready in the break room, and I misspelled not one but 2 words. As I was busy composing a corrected message, I received a reply that told me that it would be ready in 5 minutes. It took me nearly that long to properly process what exactly had happened, and what exactly it meant. I sent messages with multiple typos to half a dozen of the other project members, and all but one particularly mangled message was returned with a proper reply. Those damnable word problems that might as well have been tattooed onto the backs of our eyes after all these years flitted before me in a half-delirium, and, shouting like a madwoman, dragged the other members of the linguistic team to the box. I told them my theory and the last problem, and was met with skepticism that turned to outright shock as I proceeded to solve the first of them while I explained what I had discovered. Our meals forgotten, we began to scratch out potential solutions to the last problems the box held, sitting on the floor like children and squawking excitedly over our potential findings. Dr. Orrit, bless him, came up with the notion of using phonic readings and phrases and even numbers that carried us to the second solution within an hour. The final puzzle was more elusive, but finally succumbed when we stopped paying so much attention to the exact spellings of words. Simply enough, the words began and ended with the same original letter and were the same total number of letters, but with junk between the two. Glancing over them would yield the correct solution, whereas careful inspection led to bafflement. When we entered the last answer, we were greeted with the last message that humanity had for us. You have listened to what we've said. We await you among the stars. What things do you have to say to us? And below the message on the box's interface, one of the buttons was dimly lit. With trembling hands, I pressed it. The message on the screen changed. Press again to record and transmit voice. Note, the passage below is a count taken from one of the humans participating in the contact. It was presented as an audio transcription in the original publication, profanity included. All right, I'm Frank Bartley. I was one of the pilots who was part of the whole contact thing. That's what they're calling it now, right? All right. We were posted up in basically the middle of nowhere, we being the 54th Deep Space Defense Corps. If you don't know what we were, Deep Space Defense is heavy firepower that gets the arse end of guarding the borders of human-controlled space. It may seem a little counterintuitive having big guns for fast response, but we've pretty much always got a capital-class ship or two kicking around with us. Basically, we're armed to the teeth and constantly waiting to get dropped into the thick of whatever awful mess the Palon or the Macrar have cooked up for us. So we get the usual treatment of blaring klaxons, all hands on deck, roll the sorry asses out of bed and into your clothes, that kind of thing. So, sometimes they'll only roll out some of us for these things, but I hear plenty of rumbling about the whole fleet, as moving out to take care of something as I'm getting suited up. There was maybe a full 3,000 of the same ship as me, and it looks like they're getting everyone set to go as I'm running a pre-flights on my cockpit of the MM-98. Note: a model of troop transport aircraft capable of limited spaceflight and atmospheric re-entry. So, they get all my boys in their Sunday best, note, probable slang terminology for exosuits used by human infantry at the time, and buckled in for the warp in, we finally got our orders. First off, they tell us we're going to be hot warping in, which is a sure sign that things are already pear-shaped. See note: hot warping is terminology used to refer to low-efficiency FDR travel. Unlike cold warping or phase dropping, hot warping requires tremendous amounts of energy to maintain, but all of the matter is transferred to the desired location at the same time instead of being transferred over time and then dropped in at the end of that process. But then we got to the heads up, and we need to pay pretty close attention because we're about to handle some seriously important shit. So me and the boys were all waiting on whatever is so important that they're hot warping 2 capital ships with full complements to take care of. A grainy, but still distinguishable audio clip played through my helmet. The voice's English sounds like super off, but you can still understand the words. If these words ever reach you, know that humanity did have friends amongst the stars. Those hopes that you were not alone, we received them, even in the face of our own end. We think of you, even if our bones are ground to dust and the earth we tread is turned to ash. I hope that you may one day find what remains of us and lay it to rest. Good night, brothers. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a real downer, but why do they have us hauling ass to the absolute middle of nowhere when we could be sleeping for dead, albeit chummy aliens? This message was received from an unmanned observation station on the edge of our borders. We've determined from the information provided to us that the message and the FTL ping of the Polarian Cube set off after being solved that the message was sent less than 6 days ago. Considering the location of the planet, it is highly likely that any hostile forces we'll encounter in orbit are Palons. Your commanding officers will break down your specific objectives. Good luck, everyone! One crackle later, my squad commander is barking out a roll call for his pilots, and the console on my baby, note, probably referring to his aircraft, is giving me a little over half an hour real time until we drop into the fight. After affirming that my ass is in the pilot seat, along with my squad mates, my squad commander starts giving us rendition of the battle plan. The rough outline was simple. There was likely only a token group of Palon attacking this planet. My command had determined that a show of force was highly appropriate. They just sent a ship full of nerds, note colloquialism, for its derogatory implications in reference to intelligent but socially inept individuals, to come with us, so that we were going to thunderfuck everything in orbit and flex for our alien fans before dropping the eggheads, note, see above note, off to go do some science while we set up a temporary FTL junction and made sure no one else got funny ideas about attacking a planet who wanted to be besties with us humans. We spent the rest of the trip, short as it was, in amicable silence. This wasn't going to be much of a tough sell as far as fights go, so most of us fellas, myself included, probably ended up wondering if we were finally going to get to see some cute alien girls. Nothing in the known galaxy came even close, of course, but a guy can dream, right? So, after a bit of self-reflection, we hit the last 60 seconds and get to rumble. We drop out a hot warp close enough that we probably look like another sun for a couple of seconds to anyone down on the planet, and our part of the fleet breaks off to take care of the problems of the ground. 5 minutes after we drop in, we're hitting the Atmo. CO tells us the air's not going to kill us, but we'd probably end up with a pneumonia if we breathed in the raw for a week. By the time the hangar doors open all the way, we're seeing incoming laser fire, that ugly red shit the Palons use, arcing towards and past us, some of it careening off the shields of our carrier. We hightail it out of the hangar and make a break for it towards any clearings we can find to drop off our passengers. My luck being shit as always, I take a nasty hit in the way down. It's a damn miracle we only half crashed, and twice as lucky we went down in a copse of funky-looking trees well out of the line of fire. Most of my boys haul ass out of the back without a hitch, and the rest are busy untangling themselves from twisted up seatbelts or getting their legs back under them after the crash. But I definitely drew the short end of the stick. I'm being strangled by my own seatbelt, and one of my arms is very, very broken, along with my helmet. Well, adding insult to injury, I can see smoke coming off the fuselage from behind me. I turn around to holler at someone to come cut me out when I realize that the entrance to the cockpit has been twisted around so bad that a kid couldn't crawl through it. Now, we don't leave anyone behind in this line of work, but I'm beginning to realize how properly fucked I might be. The last of my boys hops out back, but with the cockpit in the kind of shape it is in, they ought to be dead, and they got plenty of other problems then to double-check and make sure their pilot isn't just partially hamburger. So I'm really hoping everything explodes before the fire gets to me when the whole ship shudders. It's a thwomp-thump-thump sound coming from the top of me. And then I see two pairs of arms bigger than you'll fucking believe, with claws as long as my hands smash straight through the remaining glass of the cockpit. I see two of these aliens, at least 7 feet tall each, decked out in shit that looks right out of an interstellar period piece. Note, from roughly 660 to 410 pre-aligned star calendar, when humanity was first colonizing their own solar system with entirely sublight propulsion. With a full camouflage, composite plating, and what looks like solid projectile weapons slung over their shoulders. But what really gets me is that they just start peeling off the top of my cockpit like it wasn't that big of a deal. That shit is designed to take hits from small asteroids, and these two tear the fucker straight off and pitch it 20 feet away. Not only that, but they pull out a couple of knives, and I'm wondering what way the wind's gonna blow on this one when they hack me right out of my seatbelt, and one slings me over the shoulder with one arm while the other takes a quick look around the ship. Now, we're up 15 feet off the ground, but this dude jumps down no problem and starts hauling ass towards that copse of trees. At this point, my arm hurts so damn bad that I'm seeing stars, but I can see more of these aliens picking their way through the trees, some of them carrying boxes or other equipment, and a few even carrying more humans. Right when I'm ready to give up staying conscious, the alien carrying me comes up on a long, low building covered with stuff that looks like fronds from those weird trees. He carries me inside and sets me down on a table. The whole place smells like rubbing alcohol, and there's thin glossy sheeting all over the walls and hanging like curtains around a number of other beds. I just got my ass hauled to an alien triage center. So I finally get a decent look at the fellow who carried me in. Since he's taken the time to stand over me, while some of the other aliens in medical gear that looked like it used to be white bustle from table to table. 7 feet tall, and maybe a little more seemed about right. I could see dun-colored feathers poking out from under the edges of his helmet that obscured the rest of his face. And his hands had each 2 large talons and a shorter thumb-looking thing. It was definitely bipedal, but it was wearing pants and presumably some kind of shoe too. I didn't have much longer to gawk, because it was my turn with the doctor. It made the weirdest clucking and clicking sounds as it prodded my arm and removed my helmet, surprisingly making sure not to jostle the rebreather on my mouth. It cleared up the cuts on my head with some shit that burned super bad for a few seconds before whipping up a crude splint for my arm and securing it as best it could. It looked like it was made out of a couple of rifle stocks bolted together, but it was definitely did the trick. I was still in a bad way, but the golden rule of a well-run triage tent is to get people through as fast as you can, and I ended up being moved to a cot 2 rooms over with a number of other casualties. Even though I managed to limp there under my own power, my rescuer didn't seem too interested in leaving me be. I settled on the bed, which was more of a sturdy stretcher, to be honest, and I very soon noticed the prying eyes of the other wounded. All of them were aliens. Some had burns, one was missing a hand, another had both his legs stabilized in gunstock splints like my own. The one right next to me had a number of small wounds on the right side of his face and was sporting a mass of gauze over 2 of its eyes. Finally, looking at the one of the guys without a helmet or medical gear on, I saw that they had 2 pairs of eyes and what looked kind of like a short beak at the end of a slightly jutting jaw. The one with the gauze on his face tilted his head to look at me properly. The whole room seemed oddly quiet. After an uncomfortable long silence, it spoke. "You are human. Do you speak English?" Its tone was off, and the accent, if you could call it that, was thick. "Yeah, I do. Is there something you want to ask?" Gauls rocked his head back and forth and chortled something at the other aliens in the room. The one who had carried me was clearly listening intently. After a moment, he turned back to redress me. "Yes, we wish to know, what human motion picture do you like the most?" I ended up spending the next 3 days in the triage center answering Q&A with these guys, while the rest of the Palons got cleaned up and the capital ships made official contact with the remaining governments on the planet. I got picked up my 3rd night there, and I was almost sad to get properly patched up. These fellas in the triage center were kind of odd at first, but I slowly got filled in with Gauls and the translations he did for the other patients about the whole Pullman Cube thing, and I came to understand why exactly these guys were so starstruck. Imagine human culture if we had never wondered about the existence of life besides us out in the stars. From the day that Galileo builds the first telescope, you have absolutely unshakable answer: we are not alone. Now, when we put a man on the moon, he comes back with pictures of an alien corpse. Even beyond that, the very bodies of the aliens that prove that life exists in the vast depths of space, you find their message in a bottle. A hope that there is life among the stars besides their own. That perhaps one day they can even meet in friendship. We aren't just some little green men that bailed them out of a rough situation. Our very existence has shaped their culture and outlook for centuries. We were the stuff of their hopes and dreams, the basis of their wildest science fiction, a living legend. And when they cried out desperately into the empty vastness, hoping the same hope that someone else would hear their message, who else came in the hour of need but the humans, the aliens they so adored? Even then, we did not simply come to their aid. We burst into the sky like a second sunrise and smote their foes like a hammer of vengeful God. In a single moment, we met and surpassed every single expectation that could have possibly been set for our first meeting. And it's all because we wanted them to know how big our dicks were when we rode into town. To be honest, I'm kind of jealous of them. End of main text. Document closing. Exiting program. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members: Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.